No conflict is born suddenly. Before it becomes a headline, before it becomes strategy, before it becomes physical confrontation, it was repeated thought. It was an idea fed in silence. It was a narrative sustained in seemingly ordinary conversations. It was emotion reinforced until it gained enough density to shape concrete decisions. Nothing starts big. Everything starts as an invisible pattern. Wars begin as normalized emotional division. They begin when separation stops being questioned and starts being accepted as truth. They begin when fear is repeated until it looks like prudence, when distrust is repeated until it looks like intelligence. And here is the point that needs to be brought into your personal reality. You may think this is something distant, geopolitical, beyond your reach, but the same principle that moves global structures operates silently in your daily life. The scale changes. The mechanism is the same. Every time you internally repeat, "This is difficult," you are not just venting. You are reinforcing tension as a pattern. Every time you mentally reinforce, "People are against me," you are training your perception to see opposition. Every time you feed resentment in a common conversation, you are sustaining micro-conflicts that shape your experience. The difference between the individual and the collective is scale, not principle. If repeated ideas create war on a large scale, repeated ideas create internal conflict in your life. They create sabotage. They create repeated scenarios. They create defensive relationships. They create missed opportunities. Now observe with honesty. Where are you sustaining a narrative of separation? Separation between you and prosperity, between you and love, between you and recognition, between you and the idea that you can live something greater. When you constantly say that the world is against you, that opportunities are rare, that people do not collaborate, you are applying the same vibrational mechanism that sustains larger conflicts. Not because the world is conspiring, but because your repeated attention creates a perceptual field that confirms it. Repeated thought creates a field. Sustained field creates movement. Repeated movement creates experience. If you want to bring this understanding into your reality, start with the micro. Do not wait for a big event. Observe your conversations. Observe your internal dialogue. Observe the narrative you reinforce when something does not go as planned. Interrupt narratives of division in your conversations. Stop constantly reinforcing what is wrong as identity. Observe where you feed automatic judgment. Notice where you turn an episode into a generalization. Collective consciousness begins with individual consciousness. It always has. If you change the pattern you repeat internally, you alter your personal field. And an altered personal field changes experience. Not in a mystical way, in a structural way. Your perception changes, your decisions change, your posture changes, and a different posture generates a different response. The collective is merely the amplified reflection of what millions do individually. If conflict begins as repeated thought, peace also begins. If division begins as constant narrative, unity also begins. If scarcity begins as repeated belief, prosperity also begins, and it begins within. Nothing on a large scale happens by distraction. Conflicts form because there was focus maintained with intense emotion. When an idea is repeated with enough conviction, it begins to organize decisions around it. Direction does not arise from chance. It arises from sustained emotional insistence. Now bring this into your life directly. What are you sustaining with intensity today? Fear of losing. A sense of delay. The constant idea that you must fight for everything. The belief that nothing comes easily to you. Because what you reinforce with emotion begins silently structuring your experience. You may think you are just thinking, but you are training your mind to prove what you repeat. Your perception begins selecting evidence compatible with your dominant state. Constant focus plus strong feeling organizes reality. It does not matter whether the intention is positive or negative. The law responds to consistency, not moral judgment. If you repeat "it is hard" with emotional charge, your mind begins searching for proof of it. If you repeat "I am becoming stronger," you begin noticing opportunities for strengthening. If you repeat "I am never chosen," you start seeing rejection where there may have been neutrality. The question is not whether you are creating. You are creating all the time. The real question is, which direction are you feeding with intensity? Prolonged attention strengthens a scenario. What receives daily attention gains structure. On a global scale, this creates historical movements. On a personal scale, it creates repeated life patterns. If you spend the day focused on the problem, your perception begins seeing only problems. If you spend the day reinforcing threat, you begin acting defensively. And acting defensively creates a defensive environment. People respond to your posture. The world responds to your energy. Attention is vibrational fuel. Redirecting focus is not denying reality. It is choosing which part of it you want to expand. You can recognize a challenge without turning it into your identity. You can solve a problem without becoming the problem. In the collective, the more one talks about the enemy, the more the idea of conflict is strengthened. Individually, the more you reinforce your limitation, the more it consolidates as a pattern. You do not control the entire world, but you control where you place your attention. And repeated attention becomes experience. Repeated experience becomes identity. Sustained identity becomes destiny. The dominant feeling defines the quality of decisions. Constant fear generates defensive posture. Prolonged defensive posture creates preemptive attack. This applies to nations and it applies to you. If you live in constant fear of losing, your decisions will be rigid. If you live with a sense of scarcity, you close yourself off. If you live in constant comparison, you create invisible tension that contaminates choices. Sustained feeling becomes internal climate. Internal climate shapes behavior. Behavior shapes result. Now observe your emotional base with maturity. Is it security or tension? Confidence or anticipation of problems? Stability or constant alert? When internal security is cultivated, decisions become more stable. You do not react as much. You do not overprotect yourself. You do not create conflict where it was unnecessary. You stop interpreting everything as threat. If sustained fear creates war on a large scale, sustained fear creates sabotage on a personal scale. The principle is the same. And if you understand this deeply, you stop treating your thoughts as something innocent and begin treating them as direction. There is no point in speaking about peace while feeding anger inside. There is no point in desiring prosperity while sustaining guilt at the idea of earning more. There is no point in wanting a healthy relationship while carrying old resentment and mentally reliving what has already passed. The universe does not respond to speech. It responds to state. Thought and feeling must walk together. When they move in opposite directions, you create internal noise. And noise creates delay, not because there is punishment, but because fragmented energy does not generate clear direction. If you affirm that you want growth but emotionally feel inadequate, the emotion weighs more than the sentence. If you say you want stability but internally live in constant alert, alert will be the predominant signal. The field responds to the dominant emotion, not to verbal intention. Alignment is when mind and emotion point toward the same destination. It is when you think prosperity and feel natural imagining prospering. It is when you think love and feel openness, not defense. It is when you think expansion and feel capacity, not guilt. Peace begins as an internal state before becoming an external circumstance. Prosperity begins as internal permission before becoming a number. Relationship begins as emotional stability before becoming someone's presence. If you want to change your reality, you need to stop vibrating conflict internally. You need to notice where you are still mentally fighting something, where you are still arguing with the past, where you are still excessively protecting yourself from a future that has not even arrived. The same energy that sustains conflict builds agreements. The same force that creates division can create reconciliation. Energy is neutral. Direction is a conscious choice. What defines the result is not the force, it is the vector. Inspired action is born from clarity, not emotional reaction. When you act from internal stability, your posture changes, your communication changes, your gaze changes, and entire environments respond differently. In the collective, this creates diplomatic agreements. In the personal, it creates unexpected opportunities. Emotionally aligned people make less impulsive and more strategic decisions. They do not react by trigger, they respond by awareness, and stable decisions change routes. You may not move armies, but you move relationships, you move family environment, you move professional environment, you move the atmosphere of a conversation, you move the direction of a negotiation, you move the climate of a home. Directed energy builds or divides. Every day you choose which one you sustain. You may not control global decisions, but you control the mental pattern you sustain daily. And that pattern influences your home, your circle, your work, your presence in the world. The collective is formed by repeated individual states. If millions sustain fear, fear gains structure. If millions sustain balance, balance gains foundation. The same applies to the micro. If you sustain constant judgment, you reinforce division in the micro. If you sustain balance, you influence in the micro. Repeated micro becomes macro. It has always been this way. Vibrational responsibility is not guilt. It is awareness that your state matters, that your frequency is not isolated, that your emotional posture contributes to the field around you. If energy moves the world, each person moves a part of it. And the same principle that creates external conflict creates internal conflict. The same incoherence that generates global tension generates personal tension. If you want peace in the world, start by dissolving war within. If you want external stability, start by stabilizing your state. If you want reconciliation outside, start by aligning thought and feeling inside. Structural change begins invisible, and it begins with you.